Have you ever been lost and wished you knew the way? Have you ever felt it would be so much easier if I simply knew the next step, how to go forward? Great projects either never get started or stop early on because the next step doesn't seem clear or logically follows. Last week, I talked about obedience, and I want to continue talking about that. And here again, I'm not talking about the kind of general list of things that we should or shouldn't do. I'm talking about God's personal call to you. What is He asking of you in whatever season, in whatever context you find yourself in? Knowing and doing the will of God makes us feel like we're a rock, even if we're in the midst of a swirling storm. Feeling like an anchor, calm, when all around you might be falling to pieces. Because you know and you can rest and be sure that you abide in God because you abide in doing His will. In the first letter of John, John wrote 3 letters that we have in the Bible. In the first letter, John, after talking about a bunch of truths about who God is, John says this to us in chapter 4. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world. We live in a day of misinformation. We live in a day of swirling hype. We live in a time of conspiracy theories run amok. Beloved, do not believe every spirit. Test them. Test them to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. I think when we begin with desire to please God, to do His will, this is very good and God is pleased with us. There is a subtlety and a nuance, and as we grow in discernment of who God is and who we are, we also need to grow in discernment of His will. The world that He has wondrously made is very complex. We do need to test and see whether the spirits that we hear and see, whether the sense of what we feel God should do, is that actually God speaking to us? Or is that actually our own desires, our own wishes, or the world's desires and the world's wishes that we are answering to? The Apostle Paul similarly felt that we need to discern, and he wrote this in Corinthians chapter 11. 2 Corinthians chapter 11. Paul writes, "And what I do, I will also continue to do." He was talking about how the Corinthians were kind of getting caught up in a bunch of celebrity speakers and a bunch of really powerful preachers who were coming and talking to them. And Paul was saying, you got to be careful. Not everything that sounds good is actually from God. "I will continue doing what I will do," said Paul, "in order to deny an opportunity to those who want an opportunity to be recognized as our equals in what they boast about. For such boasters are false prophets, deceitful workers, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. And no wonder. Even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it is not strange if his ministers also disguise themselves as ministers of righteousness. Their ends will match their deeds." Paul's point that he's making here, and I think that's important for us to hear, is that Satan, darkness, will masquerade as an angel of light. It can be easy for us to get caught up in seeing a nice package and fail to see that underneath that isn't actually the truth of the gospel. Instead, underneath that is the truth of some other desire that we hold. It's easy to think, I want to follow God's will, and this is God's will, and I want to go do it. But in actual fact, what we might be following is our own desires, replacing what we are saying are God's desires with our own. Both Paul and John give us pause. What we want to do, what we think might be obedience to God, might not be obedience to Him, but it might be actually obedience to our image of God that we've created, to our own idol, or to our very selves. Now, I don't think that we need to become conspiracy theorists, seeing demons behind every bush. C.S. Lewis, in his introduction to the Screwtape Letters, so poignantly said that there's 2 great errors, either to not believe that there's anything demonic or to make everything demonic. Either error very much pleases the devil. So I don't want to create in us a sense that we need to be conspiracy theorists about where there are good spirits and bad spirits. But what I want to pay attention to is how often and easy it is to feel that I want to do the will of God, but actually to substitute my own desires for what is actually, in fact, God's will. The temptation to make my desires God's desires. It might instead be my fears that are telling me what to do. Or I may have constructed an idea of what I think Jesus would ask of me, but really, in fact, all I'm doing there is trying to please my parents. I want us all to press in a little bit further into what it means to be obedient to God, into seeking out the desire of the Lord for us. Doing so will give us much joy in this life. It's not a simple path without any test or danger, but it is a path along which the one who leads us is faithful. And he will catch you when you stumble, and he will set your feet right on the path, and he will lead you home to him, come what may. Over the next few weeks, as I continue to talk about obedience and begin to talk more about discernment, following God's will and knowing his will, maybe start today by gardening in yourself the desire to know his will, the desire to do his will, the desire to be obedient. Think of your question. Think of the question that you are holding for God right now, where you might be asking, God, could you lead me in this? I'm not sure which path to take. Direct me, God. Show me how to proceed and where to follow. And may your desire to follow along the true path grow. And may he lead you ever along its way. May peace be with you. Amen.